Welcome to the Freedom Blueprint Show, a podcast about creating the lifestyle you want through your small business. Drawing on their experiences starting and running multi-million-dollar small businesses, three friends, John, Ryan, and Gabe, discuss how to have a business, but more importantly, a lifestyle you love.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome again to another wonderful, magical, transcendent episode of our podcast with myself, Gabriel, and Ryan.
Are you on the beach again?
I'm on the beach that is my patio.
Oh god, it looked like you had like a beach umbrella behind you.
It does look like the beach.
Yeah, it's concrete now. Yeah.
I don't know. Go back to that angle. I like that angle.
So don't be creepy. So what we're going to be talking about how you hire and bring on a number two / business partner, and a lot of us have experiences with that. So we'll kind of share what our thoughts are and see how that goes. So I know, Ryan, you said you were hiring somebody right now, so maybe.
You know, it's funny. So I ran hard for about, 10 years, 10 years. And I had a 50-50 business partner. And, personally, I know, Gabe, you have one and I think it's possible, but maybe it's just my personality. I'm not a big fan of 50-50 business partners. My struggle with it is, I think at the beginning it was awesome for me, okay? And I'll get to the point of hiring a number two. But we kind of grew to a point where we really didn't need each other anymore. We understood the business. At the beginning, we didn't. And I wanted to do different things and he wanted to do different things. And we both didn't want to do the same thing when it was different things, if that makes sense. And we felt this obligation to, well, if I go start a cabinet company, I kind of have to bring you along, right? So, breaking away was amazing. And I had 2 years of being broken away. But then I realized being on your own also sucks. Right? And that's where I created this model where I bring on a number two and I give them equity. And I've been constantly trying to refine that model. So I've been in partnerships with this kind of model before where that person has equity and they become a pain in the ass. And it sucks too. So giving equity away is something I'd really kind of suggest to people to be careful with. So what I'm currently working on is this thing called phantom equity. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think the best approach is. And I've learned this from just friends of mine and networking with high level people. And it's there's a lot of ways to structure it, but you get paid a salary, you get paid equity. I'm going to give it to you up front. But if you get fired or if you leave, all that equity goes away and you just got paid what you got paid. And I think that, in my opinion, is the best scenario. If you choose to give true equity to somebody, you better be married to that person, no matter what the amount is, right? So my approach with giving somebody equity and having them run the company, well, if they become a pain in the ass for whatever reason, and we don't see eye to eye on something major, I mean, you're married to each other. It's, what's the out look like for that person or you?
And you feel like that even if you have a pretty clear breakup agreement in your partnership agreement, right? So, okay, I'm going to give you equity 10% or 15% or whatever. And then if you want to leave, here's how that's going to work. So I'm going to value your equity based on XYZ formula, and then I'm going to be able to buy you out, and I can buy you out on terms over years.
Where that gets hard is if you have a model like mine where they're running the day-to-day. So even when you buy them out, you got to find someone else to run the day-to-day.
Right.
If you're running the day-to-day with them, not as big of a deal.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, because that's how I did it with Kevin, who's a close friend of mine, for 20 years. So, I mean, it's somebody I know well, but we tried to lay it out pretty clearly up front. Like, first of all, he steps into the equity over time, and It's based on net income. So if we hit X net income target, you're going to have 5%. Y net income target, it's going to go to 10%, 15%, and so on and so forth. So it steps up over time. It's based on the net income, and then at some point when it gets to a certain ownership percentage, he's going to be, and we're probably going to do this next year, I'm going to have him help me recapitalize the company basically. So right now, all the operating cash that we have, the $500,000 or $600,000 that we use to run things, is all my money. So next year comes around, we're going to recapitalize it based on what percentage we own. So he'll put in 30 or 35%, whatever it is at that time. And then I'll put in the rest, which will give me back, a couple $100,000, and he'll put that money in. So we did it kind of a more slow process, and then we have in the agreement how we can value the equity, which we're just doing if he wants to leave or something, where we're just doing it based on the net income from the prior year.
But the reality is you don't want to step back into that role. So what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, I'd probably close the business.
Yeah. That's stuff you got to think about up front. The sooner you think about that stuff, if you're listening to this, the better.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's personal preference, I think. Some people probably would be okay to get back in and, get their elbows in the mud again and actually just kind of run things. And I could do that, certainly. But yeah, I just don't have any interest really in doing that. So
you've got the cleanest elbows I've ever seen.
The cleanest what?
Elbows. You keep your elbows out of that mud, man. You're good at that.
That's
so
right.
your guy, so essentially, like, did he even buy equity? Because you're having him put the cash in. So, like, what is he really buying?
He hasn't put any money in. So he owns 30% now, and he hasn't put a cent in. So it's just sweat equity over the course of the last 3 years. And I accelerated it. Like, we didn't hit the net income targets that we thought we were going to for a variety of reasons. But just because I'm saving so much time in this business, still making a good income that allows me to go run my other business and try to do this whole commercial real estate stuff, like, I'm fine with it, and I want to make sure he's happy and I feel like he's compensated appropriately. So I ended up giving him, he's at 30% now, and he hasn't put any money into it. So the first money he'll put in will be next year when we recapitalize it, which I just felt like was fair, and he kind of felt like was fair, and that was kind of the plan going into it as well. It was at that point, it makes sense for him probably to put some money into it.
You're pretty far down the road, and I don't know if you guys agree. My opinion is you got to make it super hard and painful for them to leave if they're the ones running the day-to-day. It's just got to be super painful for them.
Yeah.
So I've got something built into a lot of my agreements that says there's damages if you leave. And I wish I would have done liquidated damages and defined it up front. But, you're running the day-to-day. If you leave the business, like, if it causes damages, you're going to have to pay for those damages. What sucks is you have to sue. The goal is to avoid lawsuits, to avoid the headache, and just have something written in there that motivates the person not to leave running the day-to-day.
Right.
I like that.
Or you just make it too like appealing, or like they don't want to leave because there's too much to lose from leaving. There's too much opportunity. I know, like, I think I was reading a story about Outback Steakhouse. They do some where they get equity also for running a store for like 5 years, and they get a huge compensation, but they have to stay in for 5 years. And then once they get it, they get another bonus again, a huge bonus, but again, it's spread out on over 5 years. So they have to stay vested in that time frame to keep get into that next level.
Corporations are great at this, right? They have stock options and they vest over time. It's a similar idea as phantom equity.
Yeah. The phantom equity obviously is better for the owner, right? There's no downside, right? If the person will accept it, but I guess, are you getting pushback on that from people, Robson, that like, oh, I could work here for 3 years, I have 25% equity, and then I leave and I get nothing? Like, are you getting pushback?
So I've talked about this in other podcasts. I really believe right person, right seat, and then right amount of pay. And I think that's the part of the equation most people forget to talk about. So, for example, I look at I'll just use rough numbers without using exact. If the market's 100 to 120 for that position, oftentimes I'll pay 150. This is a guaranteed amount, right? You're gonna guaranteed. So I'm paying over market of what that position's paying anyway. I think that plus they can earn the phantom equity. So it's kind of like the icing on the cake where they're currently at. Maybe they're getting paid 115 and they have no equity. So 150 plus phantom equity is better than 115 and no equity.
Yeah. And I guess that's an important thing, right? Is it kind of varies based on the position, the person you're thinking of either bringing on as your number two or partnering with is coming from. Like, my friend was making $300,000 as an attorney, and he was dropping his salary down to making 120 with me, with just a small piece of equity at first. So he spent a couple of years making less than he would have at his current job. So that was kind of his buy-in. So I guess so that's important, I think, to point out for people probably is like, kind of, it depends a little bit on what kind of person you're hiring and what they're used to making. Because like you said, if they're making more than they were before just on salary, then sure, they don't even really, the equity is just like a extra carrot for them to reach the icing on the cake. They're not like counting on that as a core part of their like pay.
But the outside of that is the equity, and the fact that it could disappear if they leave motivates them to do a good job and stay on the phantom equity.
I was under the impression I don't understand the phantom equity. I thought the phantom equity was more so like when you pay what you would pay in equity, but just from a percentage of the profits, and there really is no equity. So
it's not true equity. Like they don't have membership interest. They don't get to vote.
Right.
What they do is when the company sells, they get paid out as if they had equity.
Got it. I mean, I think for our business, equity is like it's kind of bullshit, you know. If you can just structure like a good bonus compensation plan, that's probably a better deal.
Real estate flipping business, right? Because you don't sell a real estate flipping business,
right?
The big difference with the phantom equity is they don't participate in the losses. Where with real equity, they do.
Right. So it's essentially just like a company bonus plan.
Yep. But the big carrot is when the company sells, they get a huge pay cut or pay advance or big payout. I mean,
right. That works for another business that there's a multiple, but like for our business, like there is no.
But you got to remember, a lot of people listening to this podcast are dentists and doctors and those type of people too that have businesses that are potentially sellable.
Correct.
So I mean, and Robeson, the way you have it set up is your guy going to be getting at that percentage of profits too that relates to the phantom equity. So he's got 20% phantom equity. So every year he gets 20% of the profits, and then when it sells, he'll get 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
20% of the profits minus the guarantee pay. You don't get it plus the guarantee pay.
Okay.
Well, the whole thing too is if you explain to them how the equity works, and you go through the time to explain how finances work. I mean, like, they'll probably take less pay as well, which would benefit the business, where you give up equity, but they can take less pay because they understand their net worth is going to be increasing and they're not getting taxed on that money either,
But it sounds like you intentionally aren't doing that model, Robeson. Like you're intentionally paying them more base than they otherwise would be making, plus you're adding this on. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that and why not do it the way Gabe says, where you pay them a little bit less and then they get the equity. You're obviously thought about it and want to pay them more.
It's just a negotiation. I mean, he won't come over for less. So it's, arguing over 25, 50 grand when you're looking at making $5 million is just not worth it to me.
Yeah. And then in terms of, Gabe, I mean, what you said for real estate flipping companies in particular, right? I mean, this equity is worthless because we can't sell this company, right? So that equity is worthless in that way. But what it is worth is that percentage of our net income, right? So just like, Gary Sharper, I know, Ryan, on your call that you talked about said, we're in like the profit taking part of our life cycle, right? We're just trying to max out our profit, get to 7 figures plus profits. I mean, 7 figures of profit is a lot of fucking money if you have 30% of it. So that's where it is still meaningful for him in terms of the equity, and his equity relates to how well the company does. Like that's why I like that over even a bonus. And the other thing too is just that intangible of like the person acts like a business owner. Like he acts like a business owner because he feels like it, because he is. Now, that's an intangible. You might not always need that depending on the position, but that gives you a lot. That gives me a lot more trust.
So the curveball on that on the real estate company is if you're buying rental properties and they have equity in your business, they are equity owners on those rental properties essentially in that entity. And the cash flow that comes from those from years. So that's something to consider. And that's where equity does come in play.
Equity does play there. Yeah, but what we're looking to do in our company is we're doing a company bonus plan for the entire team, basically, where, if I had a number 2, they would obviously get a higher percentage of profits than regular employees. But they would get that percentage of profits. And then that percentage of profits, I want that vested into an account that we would use to acquire rentals, and they would build their equity that way.
I think it's great allowing your company to be a part of the cash flow process. We talked about this on our last call. Too many real estate flipping wholesaling companies don't focus enough on cash flow. They pass up on deals that are amazing cash flow deals.
Right.
And, I think one thing that we're not talking about is the reasons why you hire a number 2. Ignore the finances and the equity, which we just talked about, but put that aside for a second. Like, what are the real reasons why you need a number 2?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll talk for me, like, whether you call Omer a number 2 or just my partner or whatever, but like, it's just funner. Like for me, like I did the business for about 1.5 years on my own. And I always needed someone to talk to like bounce ideas off and like throw stuff at and kind of just share ideas with and do things. And so like, for me, it was just more fun to just have a second person.
You already call me once a month. I mean, I can't imagine if you did have Omer, you'd be calling me once a week.
There you go. And, you know, and then even then, like now to this day, I mean, like as me and Omar are both matured in the business and the business has matured, like what's pretty cool now is that as time goes on, you both start finding your own unique abilities and you start really working towards your strengths. So like my number one goal is to figure out, okay, like how do I just do more and more and more of what I love? And how do I get Omar to do more and more and more of what he loves? And if we both can spend 80% of our time or more just doing that, I know we'll get exponential growth, you know? And so that's also a big
question. Is, you know, having a partner and or number two allows you to have more fun and enjoy the business more. You specifically, right?
Yeah.
But maybe others, you know, maybe a more introverted person might not. But it also allows you to focus on more what you love. John, what other reasons do you think having a number two is important?
Well, we're both super introverted for the record. Like you look at our disc profiles, we're both super low eyes. He's even more introverted than I am, but yeah.
I don't know.
You guys have virtually the same like personality profile?
I would not agree with
No. We don't have the same personality profile, but we're just both low. We're just both very low eyes. We're both introverted.
I see. So
yeah.
like,
I'm high D. I'm super high D. I'm like a 99 D. He doesn't have a high D, and I'm low S. I'm like low to mid C, but he's like super high S, super high C.
So does that make you more of the natural like leader and driving forward force of the business?
Yeah, for sure.
So John, other than those two reasons that Gabe brought up, I mean, what other reasons is there for it to have a number two?
So that one, to just have more fun, to have company on this journey, was one for me too. I mean, all three of us now mentioned that. So I mean, I actually agree with that, even though I am very introverted. Like I had 7 years of doing it by myself, and I was just kind of like tired of going it alone. Was definitely part of it. So just having that company.
You make decisions by yourself, right? And not outside people.
Yeah.
And your friends stop taking your calls at some point.
Right. I mean, if you even had anything to start with, right, which I didn't, so that's a whole nother sort of problem. So yeah, I mean, I think the company one, you know, is definitely one, and just having somebody that's there along with you. I think the other thing for me certainly is I did it so that I could just remove myself, and I wasn't confident. Partially was I wasn't confident in my ability to find a really kick-ass acquisitions person. So in our business, as you guys know, a good salesperson who meets with a homeowner, signs the properties up. Our business like lives or dies with that. And even if somebody is kick ass, a lot of these people turn over. And it's just like probably the most difficult position in our business. So I was not confident I was going to be able to hire somebody super effectively who was going to be good, who was going to stick around. And so I knew that he would be my partner, my friend would be good at that. And then also I think just longer term, I mean, I was kind of tired of the business to some extent. I was tired of, I don't see myself really doing this for very long. So this is a way to get myself out of it. This is a way for me to set him up to be taking over most of it, the running the day-to-day, to allow me to figure out what the next business is, which is what I've been lucky enough to be able to do on the commercial real estate side. So that was my particular reason as well.
That's my number one too, John, is to gain more time.
It's like essentially you sold the company, but in your own way, right? Like you're done with it, you want to get out, but you really can't sell. But this is the way that you can exit from it, basically.
And if you're a true visionary, I mean, you sometimes get bored and you hate being in the weeds and the details, and you're unhappy, as Gabe said, you're not focusing on what you love, right? So a true visionary needs a really good number two, especially if you want to do other businesses and do other things like that. That's my personality. Like I get bored with the details. I get bored once I've solved problems and they're running smoothly. I'm like, okay, what the hell is the next thing I can go disrupt? Right? I'm a disruptor in that way, which is sometimes a bad thing.
Right.
I disrupt the team, and the number two is there to keep you from doing that.
Yeah, and that's the nature. I mean, of all these personality traits, is that they have the good part of it and they have the bad part of it, you know, as well. Like what makes you a kick-ass entrepreneur, you know, Ryan, is also probably the thing that caused you the most grief, you know, and kind of similar for a lot of us.
All of us, yeah. It was interesting. I was listening to a talk the other day from Simon Sinek, and he was sharing an example of like how when this whole COVID thing, like he basically he shared a story where he made everyone on his team share like 15 ideas of what they can do to pivot their business and transform their business. And he's like, I don't care what the idea is. And everyone's like, why 15? He's like, because your first 3 ideas, you know, I'm going to have those ideas myself. Like, I don't need to know the first 3. So he made everyone go 15. He's like, look, not everyone's going to have good ideas. Not everyone's ideas are going to be selected, but just everyone stick out the 15. And what's interesting is what he told them, which I really, really liked and rang home for me, was like, after the ideas came back, there was really only like, he was like, there was only like 2 or 3 or 4 really good ideas that I would have never in a million years thought of. And they were really, really key to like taking our business to the next level. But they only came from 1 or 2 people. He's like, the other 10 people on my team didn't have good ideas. And he's like, but that doesn't make them invaluable, because he's like, the people who came up with the good ideas doesn't necessarily mean they're the best people to actually like execute on the ideas, you know? He's like, there are probably other people on the team that would be way better at executing than these guys who came up with the ideas. And I'm like, man, that's so true. You know, like for some of us, we just all have our strengths and our weaknesses, you know?
Yeah.
What do you guys consider the top personality traits of a number 2? What to look for when you look for a number 2?
Yeah, I mean, the conventional wisdom, right, is that you should have somebody that has opposite strengths and weaknesses to what you have, right? So if you're more like an operational, more introverted person like I am, you would want more of the extroverted, sociable, a little more like hard driving potentially person that kind of complements you. I didn't do that at all. I picked somebody that's exactly like me, and he and I have virtually the exact same personality profile. Like if you line up our disc or our PIs, like they almost like overlap, which is why we get along. Because I just knew that if it was somebody different, I personally probably would really get irritated by that person, and they wouldn't be a big fan of me. So I thought that just compatibility was more important than the fact that we weren't really getting like really good synergies. So we're kind of good at the same thing.
So what personality traits do you think a number 2 needs, John?
I think it depends on what their main role is. Like, assuming it's a COO.
Depends on the business too, right?
What's that?
Yeah.
I said depends on the business too, right? Like I think it would be different in like a sales organization than maybe an operations-driven organization.
Right.
Let's call it a true COO, like somebody that's supposed to run the operations.
Yeah. So you want someone that has the right mix of drive with detail orientation, in my opinion, for that kind of role. Like a lot of these personality profiles, you see those as 2 big personality like attributes. So you want somebody that's going to be able to drive and get down to results, but is also detail oriented enough where they can put a process in place. They can hold people accountable. They can have KPI worksheets. They track somebody to, all that kind of stuff. So to me, those are probably my top 2 that I kind of think about.
You named 2 that I feel really strongly about, and I don't know about, I want to get your opinion, Gabe, but I think the top on my list, and I had a really good number 2 for a while, but he wasn't good at this, and it was a failure in my organization, is being able to hold people accountable. I mean, that is just so important.
Leadership, basically.
What's that?
There's basically leadership.
Yeah, the leadership skills, being able to be accountable. I also think somebody that is, what you said is right up there too, John, for me, is the ability to document processes and systems. Because if you can't, you can't, religiously, there's this saying that sin can't exist if there's no knowledge, which kind of makes sense, right? Like, how can you sin against something if you didn't know that it was a sin, right? Stuff can't exist if there's no knowledge. Like knowledge is super important. Well, I think you can't hold people accountable for something that they didn't know or were known that they own the outcome of. I think we do that as parents. I think we do it in our organizations with our people. We get frustrated with people because they should have known, or this is obvious. I knew it. Why didn't you know? Right? We do that all the time. And that's something that I look out for, is how well are they as a leader? I think you hit that right on the head, Gabe. Can they train? Can they create clear systems and processes and KPIs and metrics, and then hold people accountable for it? And that is such, like, I can't think of any better personality type for a number 2. And if you aren't that person, you need a number 2 that can do that. It'll make your organization better.
Yeah. And I think probably a middle of the road introversion, extroversion thing is probably ideal as well, because you want somebody that does enjoy to some extent the interaction with the people, because they're going to be the manager, the leader, they're going to be doing the meetings. Ideally, that person can bond with people on the team and is extroverted enough to do that and want to do that. But you don't want somebody so extroverted where they're like afraid to hold people accountable because they don't want to ruin the relationship. The relationship more important to them.
In a weird way, you really don't want them to be friends. You don't want them going golfing on the weekends and going to the bars at night and hanging out. Like, you really want to keep that professional relationship. And there, yeah.
I think there's a balance. I think there's a balance between all that, because you definitely want to have meaningful relationships with the people you work. Because if you don't, culture is not as good. It's hard to influence people. So there's a fine line between the two,
So what do you think the personality traits that a number 2 should have, Gabe?
I don't know. I think it greatly depends on the business. I really hate the word COO for the most part, just because I feel like in real estate, as an example, in real estate in business, that word is just used way too loosely. And I feel like you really don't need a COO in our business. What you really need is a sales manager or sales leader. And I think a sales leader is a different person than a COO per se.
Different, yeah, but they can still have those qualities of accountability and processes and systems, right? Like people could still have that and not be a true COO. I think in general, managers of departments should be able to have those personality traits, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they should have the key skills required to succeed in the roles that are necessary for the business. So your COO should be able to do sales just as good as any person in that company should be able to do, or whatever work needs to be done in that business. And they should definitely be a leader. They should be able to just influence people. I mean, that's key. Like if they can't make friends and they can't get people to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do without their input, like that's not a good sign,
Yeah, and I don't think that, I mean, I can give you guys an example, but I don't think the COO needs to be an expert of every department. And should they be able to step in and help? Maybe. Companies of bigger sizes, maybe not. Like if you run a dentist in 13 locations, like your COO doesn't necessarily need to know how to fill a cavity, right?
Right.
If the dentist doesn't show up. But, I had an example the other day with one of the companies I'm looking at where like the IT department head kept clashing with the current owner, or the COO, let's call it, just for argument's sake, because the COO kept saying, implement this, and our customers need it. And the IT guy's saying, well, hold on a second. If I implement it, it's a Band-Aid. What really needs to happen is I need to stop implementing stuff and fix something before I put these Band-Aids on it. And there was just this huge disconnect, and the COO they don't know how to do coding, but right. The COO wasn't good enough in that role to say, you're right, we do need to fix the foundation before we could put Band-Aids on things. So that's what I mean by like a COO or a manager, let's call it, a department needs to be able to understand systems and processes and hold people accountable, but not necessarily know how to code IT systems.
They don't need to. But that's where the CEO would come as an example, right? So like if the CEO of that dentist practice comes up with some revolutionary new way of how to fill a cavity or prevent a cavity, his job would be to sell the COO on that vision and make sure that that vision gets executed in that company. And then the COO would then make sure to, take the lead on that and take charge on that,
That's my problem as a CEO. I have that problem all the time. I talked to my dad's COO years ago. He's no longer with the company, but I remember one day he told me we had this 1-story building and I figured out how to make it 2 stories and increase revenues by 60%. I figured this special way to do it. I walked in your dad's office and the first thing he said after I presented to him was, how come we're not doing 3 stories? And he was like, are you freaking kidding me? He was like, come on, I just spent all this time going to 2 and I thought you'd be impressed by that. So I think as a CEO, as a visionary, we tend to, want to go bigger. Well, 6 months, why can't you do it in 2 months? Right? Like, what do you mean it takes you 6 months? And they're like, I got it down from a year to 6 months. What do you mean 2 months? And a COO is in a tough position with guys like us that want to push and drive and ask questions like, well, why not? Well, why not? And, CEOs tend to do that. And you need a good COO that's willing to properly understand your personality as a CEO and work well with you. I mean, that is so big. If you're hiring a COO or a number 2 or whatever you call it, make sure that they are willing to stand up to you and not just appease you.
Yeah, they have to.
They're willing to, and you're willing to listen to them, and you create a good a way to communicate.
And it happens, and it works both ways. Because I'm way more dominant. So Omer isn't, and that's one of the reasons why also we probably get along well, right? Because if I was in a room with somebody else that's dominant, we probably would kill each other. But he sometimes will not step up enough and will let me have my way. And if my way is the wrong way, we get into trouble. So I also have to learn okay, well, I also need to listen a little bit more and be able to take a step back a little bit more. So it's a double-edged sword, but yeah, I agree. Both parties need to play their role, Yeah.
And I think, and the CEO still has to have some oversight of the COO, right? I think a lot of guys, certainly that we see in our industry, they're visionary, they're a little ADD, they're got big ideas, then the next big idea, and they're leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. And they're like, all right, I'm just going to like hire a COO. He's going to like fix all this shit. Right.
Yeah.
And like the COO comes in and like, but you still have to monitor and manage that COO. So, is this dude doing a good job? Is he doing a bad job? What is he doing? You can't just say, well, I'm a visionary, so I'm just not going to think about all the other aspects of being a true business owner. Like, you still have to have some oversight there, which is one thing I want to caution people about.
A perfect COO, in my opinion, or number two, whatever the heck you want to call it. I know Gabe doesn't like it. Every time I say it, I'm like, oh, Gabe doesn't.
Don't worry about it.
A perfect, I got to make you happy, Gabe. A perfect number two, in my opinion, takes a CEO's vision and placates him. I mean, look, we're all, as visionaries, we're all just like little kids, man.
What do you mean placates it?
I'll show you. I mean, we see a toy and we're like, oh, I want that toy. It's amazing. I want it right now. Mommy, get it for me. And a good parent, it's like, oh, okay, that toy is really interesting. Let's talk about it. Why is it cool? What do you like about it?
Right.
Just the idea of talking about it gets the CEO past the idea of actually doing it, right?
Right.
CEO's job, in my opinion, number two's job is not to say no and stand up to the CEO all the time and tell them they're stupid. The CEO's job is to say, all right, let's talk through that and walk through why it's so exciting and what the reality looks like, and to properly show you the reality. And as a CEO, your job is to communicate back and say, okay, yeah, you're right. I do see the reality. That's not a good idea. Right. But as long as, in my opinion, if a COO goes down that route of, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? What if we tried that? And we like beat it up enough to where I realize you're right, it won't work. But my personality doesn't like to stop until there's an answer.
Right. I'm the same way.
And I need to see the three options before I say, yep, okay.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially the CEO is the guy looking out, right? And the CEO, or the number two, is the guy looking in. And you need both. You need someone looking out to kind of steer the ship and say, okay, this is where we're headed. This is where we're going. But then you need the guy actually running the ship to be like, how the hell are we going to do that? We don't have enough gas to get to that place you want to go to, or whatever,
Yeah. And then Mike is, okay, can we air flight it in? Oh, we didn't think about that. I guess we could. Okay, well, what's the cost of that? And those conversations need to happen. And a COO needs to be willing to dive into your world for a little bit.
Yeah.
And bring you back down to reality in a way that fits well with you.
And what if you are a COO business owner like me? Then who do you hire as a COO?
Say that again?
What if you're a COO business owner like me, as opposed to the normal where it's the visionary? So what kind of COO should someone with my personality type hire?
Maybe
you're probably a hybrid.
Would that work?
Because I would think that there's some visionary in you. There's got to be.
Yeah.
And there's people that can play both. There's, that can do both well enough.
The new marketing methods, is that you, John, or is your COO doing that?
Me. Yeah.
Who's doing what?
In our business, that's a visionary thing to do. Like, hey, what
was the question?
Who's coming up with the marketing methods? Marketing methods is a visionary thing in our business, right? We do handwritten letters. We should do postcards. Let's try this out. Let's try that out. That's all visionary type stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't do any of that stuff. I hate that stuff. I have Omar do that stuff.
No, but that's a visionary thought, right? Like those are visionary thoughts. So create new ideas. Who's coming up with, hey, what if we structure a deal this way differently? What if we did this and did a seller carry and all that kind of stuff? Is that you that comes up with those?
Yeah,
that's a visionary thing. Those are visionary thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just good at everything. I guess that's
there's people that can do both. I mean, look, Ray Dalio is a good example of somebody that, built that shit on his own. Like, there's people that can do both,
True.
What I'm trying to show John is that I think he's more of a visionary than he realizes.
He probably is, for sure. Without a doubt.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. Well, cool. But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys, is there anything else we should go over? We're at about 30, or should we think we should wrap here?
Reach out to me directly, like become my Facebook friend, shoot me a message. I'm on Instagram also. I'm sure you guys are too. And, comment on this post. And, this is a very serious subject, and it's something I'm happy to jump on the phone one-on-one with you. I don't have time to jump on the phone with everybody, but this is such a serious subject that you're probably you probably have more questions that come from this podcast. So feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer anything. And, I don't know, John and Gabe, if you guys have the time for that also.
Yeah, you're very generous. I mean, if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to take a call as well. I don't know how many people I'll be able to get to, but I'll definitely will be glad to respond to some people.
What's the best way to contact you if people had questions about this, Gabe, about your partnership with Omer and how that works? Is
Facebook. Look me up on Facebook, Gabe Garcia, or I think it's Gabe Garcia 311. If you look me up on Facebook, is the username.
So his phone number is 714. No.
Yeah, and same with me. Facebook's the best with me too, John Carcone. Unlike these two very kind and generous gentlemen, I will not be spending any time with anyone. But I would certainly love to be friends with you on Facebook, and you can see my posts, and we can be virtual besties, which I would really enjoy.
Good.
All right. Well, I think that covers it. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. See you on the next episode. Later.